about? That's what everyone is talking about all over the world in various ways. What is Easter about today? Well, I came up with a list of what Easter is about, and there's ascension, atonement, resurrection, rebirth, suffering, eggs, death, transmutation, transformation, transition, betrayal, blessing, bunnies, release, revelation, contemplation, crucifixion, chocolate, sacrifice, immortality, and many more. That's 20 that I listed. So here we go. You ready? Number 1. We'll go through them all. Do you have time? Have a seat. So the first thing I want to talk about is resurrection. You know, resurrection's talked about a lot during this time, of course, because of the story of the crucifixion and everything that happened around then, over today and over the next few days. And then I was thinking about that, that idea of resurrection, and is there anything that really needs to resurrect? Because having something that is needed to resurrect implies that something died. And I believe that if there's some good in us, whether it's an idea or a personality trait or anything like that, if some good has disappeared from our consciousness, from our intentions, from our thoughts and feelings, it's not dead. It's just misplaced. And it can be found by looking sharp, which is our theme for this month, by looking sharp at the truth of how the universe works, at the truth of how the divine is within, and then by living that truth. Jesus, or Yeshua, like I like to call him, as that is his Hebrew name, Yeshua, he delivered a powerful message. His whole ministry, take away all the supposed miracles and everything else. His ministry was about saying that the divine is within. And he was saying, listen to what I say, watch what I do. These things you too can do. He was telling everyone, I'm not special, I'm just an example. Step in and join in with this example. Each person has the divine power within. Now that idea has been reminded to us for 2,000 years, especially those in the Christian and philosophies and traditions. You've been hearing about it for 2,000 years. Some of you maybe not quite that long. And yet sometimes we haven't gotten it yet. Sometimes we are like the Hebrews in the Passover story that just didn't get that whole idea that Moses was talking about. And they went through much suffering. And the same thing with the Jews and the Hebrews of Jesus' time. They weren't listening. They were hearing. They were physically hearing, but they weren't listening. They weren't embodying what he was trying to say. They were still allowing outside stuff to influence them. So the great example that Yeshua had to make a great and very dramatic sacrificial example in the crucifixion. And still then, many didn't get his ministry. People are saying, and I've been reading a lot, ministers talking to each other, and what are you talking about on Easter Sunday, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of people were saying things, were putting out this quote that says, you can't have a resurrection without a crucifixion, nor a betrayal. You can't have a resurrection without a crucifixion. You can't have a crucifixion without a betrayal. And I get the sentiment, I get the metaphor, especially considering today is Easter, and that's the story that most places are talking about or relating to. It's about, and in a deeper meaning, in a more metaphoric meaning, it's about forgiveness of a self-betrayal. The sort of Judas in us when we have made bad choices, have had bad ideas out there, have allowed not so great influences or people to either come into our lives or stay in our lives. And so we want to, like Jesus did as the example a few days later, transmute to a new level of consciousness. But crucifixion? Do we need to have a death? Do we need to have a crucifixion? Do you know what a crucifixion really is? I know you know what it looks like from the pictures and from movies and everything, but let me give you a true definition of crucifixion and why it was done. Crucifixion was a punishment, usually done nude. So they would strip the clothing off the person they were crucifying, contrary to most paintings or even in the movies that you see for obvious reasons. But that was the practice. And that practice was not just in Rome, but was in many parts of what is now considered the Middle East. It was intended to provide a death that was particularly slow, painful, gruesome, humiliating, and very public. In fact, the word excruciating means out of crucifying. Again, I know it's a metaphor that we talk about it now, especially in a New Thought reference, but do we really want to go through that to get to the next step in our consciousness, whatever that is, in all the areas of our lives? Even metaphorically, do we really want to go back to that whole no pain, no gain thing? Must there be pain to gain? I say not necessarily. I say that some of the metaphors that are going on during this holiday do not serve us. Now, I understand sometimes transformation can be painful. I totally get it. I've had some transformations in my lives. I've had some realizations in my life that did come through some pain of some sort, usually an emotional pain. But must we step into the dark to get to the light? Do we want to invite excruciating pain in order to release ourselves from the consciousness that is no longer serving us? Maybe that's what the bunnies and chocolate are all about. They're there to kind of sweeten up what's going on in the reference to this holiday, metaphoric or not. Deepak Chopra wrote, the symbolic language of the crucifixion is the death of the old paradigm. Resurrection is a leap into a whole new way of thinking. You know, the Bible tells us, and the New Testament tells us that the apostles, those people who were around Yeshua all the time for those whole 3 years, didn't get it at first, like I was saying before. In fact, it was 49 days after Easter and 50 days after Passover, depending on when Passover was, till they really got it. Now, that happens to be a holiday in the Jewish tradition called Shavuos or Shavuot, which is at that time, was the start of the wheat harvest and the end of the barley harvest. It was another spring harvest or early summer harvest celebration. It was also a celebration later on of the deliverance of the Torah and the Ten Commandments during the whole Passover story from Mount Sinai. And then, of course, at that same time or around that same time, because of the lunar calendar, etc., the Pentecost is there. Now, the Pentecost is when these apostles started getting what was going on, what they've been learning about and witnessing and being a part of for those 3 years that we know of that Yeshua was ministering. And in there, at the Pentecost, the Ruach HaKodesh, as it says in the Hebrew version of the New Testament, descended upon the apostles. The Spirit of the holiness descended upon them. It was a divine moment for all of them when they realized, oh, and they started embodying it. So much so that many of them went out and wrote about their experiences. Not immediately. Evidently, it was a few decades later. But many of them went out, and that's how the Christian religion really began. Because the apostles, many of them went out to say, whoa, I really get this. Now I want to spread the word. This great word that the divine is within. If you haven't heard about this guy, Jesus, that, was a friend of mine and that I followed for 3 years, he talked about all this kind of stuff, that the divine is within, and all these miracles that he did, you could do too. You have the power within you. It just takes consciousness and belief. Now, I know that the apostles and the Jews during the Passover story, they might have needed time to meditate on this. There was a lot going on. But do we have to wait till June to get it, to apply it, and to be it, to embody it? No. And I don't want to kill or crucify my limiting beliefs. I don't think I need to resurrect the divine that's already within me. I just want to replace them with better ideas, with the best ideas, with the true ideas, with those ideas that I am perfect, whole, and complete in spirit, and with that power that is within me, I can outpicture that spiritual perfection, wholeness, and completeness in all my experiences. This story and the Passover story, which we are still within the holiday of Passover, is about revelation and unfoldment. Charles Fillmore, who was somebody that Ernest Holmes knew and was also a student of Emma Curtis Hopkins, him and his wife Myrtle started the Unity Church of Practical Christianity, as it was originally called. He wrote this: in the unfoldment of the spiritual mind, there are periods when the idea that we have meditated on and accepted as true spring forth into consciousness, becoming living realities in our life instead of mere concepts. In this awakening, we get the fruits of the idea that we have planted in our mind. We have escaped from the darkness, and in this he's talking about Egypt and what the Jews were going through, and the Jews looking at the Pharaoh as God, instead of that divine within, the godness within them, and have entered into light. The promised land is what he's talking about, in light. So does something have to die before we can live? Replaced, maybe, but not necessarily die. I know sometimes there are things within us, and we need and feel we need to take over that power by killing it, by doing something that is not physically violent, but maybe spiritually violent in a way. Or you could also think of it as a spiritual death where you just lay it down. So there is a quiet death going on there. That just came to me. Spirit just was just saying, yes, but. But I prefer replacing that. I prefer uh, replacing those ideas with new ideas. And as I replace them over and over, those old ideas just float away, just go away. Maybe, yes, they do die. For me, it's an act of busting through, which is why I came up with that statement. It's like when a plant breaks through the seed and when a chick breaks through the egg, thus the egg reference, when a butterfly comes out and goes through and busts through their cocoon. There's a transmutation going on. There's a transmutation going on within inside each and every one of us when we bust through some idea and leave it behind. Some idea that no longer serves us at all. Maybe it did serve us before. Even some of the negative ideas serve us. That's sort of the spiritual idea, the metaphoric idea of Judas. That betrayal. That betrayal served what Jesus decided, what Yeshua decided need to happen in order for people to get what he's been talking about for 3 years or more. So it's the breaking out of one's shell and sometimes one's comfort zone, the old ways of being and believing emerging into the new. And I know sometimes there's a transition period in there, and we have to be okay with that transition period. I have to be okay with that transition period when I'm in it, and sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it's not fun to be in that transition period. But it is in that transition period, and I've talked about that idea before, that liminal space where the education starts dropping in, where spirit really starts dropping in, and we are at one-ment, in atonement, during this contemplative neutral zone. And things may look like they're going even worse. Like sometimes some medicines make you feel worse, or some chiropractic adjustments in a way make you feel worse at first, and then the next day it's like, oh, this too could happen as we are transmuting, as we are adjusting, as we are stepping into the new consciousness. But we don't have to wait till Passover. We don't have to wait till Easter to step into the city of peace. To have that peace within our hearts. The power of the I am is already here. It's already now. And we get to redeem that power anytime, any place. That power of the Christ consciousness, the Christ spirit that is within each and every one of us already. Sometimes we have to get into the mud. We have to get dirty to move forward. But like Thich Nhat Hanh said, no mud, no lotus. Do you know what he means by that? The lotus, that beautiful lotus flower, grows out of mud. This beauty grows out of gunk and mud and dirt and then arises. And in that liminal space, in that neutral zone, in that in-between of moving away from the condition or the idea that no longer serves us, that we don't want in our lives anymore, even if that's a good thing and we just want to rise even higher, uplift ourselves even higher in this idea of prosperity in any part of our lives. We lift up to a more beautiful us. A more beautiful us in experience, because that beautiful us is already there. Because spiritually we are perfect, whole, and complete, and beautiful. I don't want you to go out and change, because that's an external event. I want each and every one of us to transform and transition internally. And if you feel like you must resurrect something, do so in the revelation that the divine nature is already in you. You're just opening up and revealing it. Walt Whitman wrote this great poem, and it says, "The moment you stand up and claim your divinity, Christ is reborn within your heart. Buddha rejoices. Muhammad dances upon the mountaintop. Lao Tzu, who supposedly wrote the Tao, winks approvingly, and the promise of the tree of life is fulfilled. And I know that the hand of God is the promise of my own. And I know that the Spirit of God is the brother of my own. And that all the men ever born are also my brothers, and the women my sisters." Walt Whitman. So let me close with this. Repeat after me. I reveal respect and love, not fear. I reveal a graceful and centered calm, not chaos. I reveal health and vitality, not hurt. I speak the language of the I am. I transform my consciousness to my highest expression. I am vibrant light. I am a life of joy and beauty. I am loving presence. And I am a wise creation, prosperous in all ways. I am now resurrected in mind, heart, and soul. I am energized. I am bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And I am ready to rock and roll. Now, surprisingly enough, all 20 of those ideas that Easter brings that I spoke about in the beginning, I have spoken about. We've gone through all 20. And as the talk title says, or questions, who's got the coolest looking egg? Well, you do. And you do, and you do, and you do, and I do. So let's start cracking. Namaste. Thank you all so much.